I'm thrilled to share with you that there's this new interest in a renewed interest in private practice that for a few years was maybe waning a little bit. Time back to this question of what have I observed are some of the biggest pitfalls that folks run into, and it's simply not taking the time to devote to the process to really doing it for themselves. Technology and social media has done a lot of amazing things to connect people, but it's also done a lot of not amazing things in confusing people.
This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together. Today's guest is someone I'm thrilled to introduce. He's nationally recognized thought leader, CE educator, and trusted strategic advisor and keynote speaker. With nearly 2 decades of experience, he is a champion of independent healthcare and collaborative leadership, helping to build sustainable, people-centered business models in optometry. He's authored multiple ebooks and dozens of influential articles on profitability, practice acquisition, financial forecasting, and strategic growth in review of optometric business, Eyes on Eye Care, and other publications. He's President and Chief Vision Officer of Akrinos. Please welcome Erich Mattei. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. Very much looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, man, it's been a long time coming. I've been following you for a while. We've been meeting. I'm excited to have this conversation because you have a unique perspective in that you see a lot of folks in a lot of different stages of growth that are in optometry. So with that, what is the most important thing that helped you grow your specific empire?
That's a big question, Ankit. Now, I would say, if it was one thing, it's courage. But when I say courage here, I think it's important to consider, what does courage consist of? And if you think about it, it's kind of 3 pillars. Yeah. The first of these is purpose or vision, the why. And we'll unpack in this conversation the why behind what I do and the work we do within Akrinos, but certainly having that vision at the forefront, that purpose. Number 2 is process. Because you can have the greatest vision, you can have the most sincere purpose and why driven behind your motives, but without the processes, you're not going to really progress all that much. And then that third area is perseverance. And I know you and I had some recent conversations around just this world of entrepreneurship, and whether it's, the work that you guys are doing and My Care, the work we're doing at Akrinos, or the doctors that we are here to serve, perseverance is absolutely a part of entrepreneurship and growing businesses. So I would say, if you're asked that, it's a hard question to answer, right? But the one thing that really has made a difference in us, getting Akrinos on the map and growing it, ties back to courage and the purpose, the process, and perseverance collectively that position us to have the courage to make it happen.
Gotcha. I like that. And as far as, I'm going to spin this question for you a little bit because you work with a lot of optometrists. What do you see as some of the things that make your most successful practices successful? Like, can you share a couple of stories?
Oh, wow. Let's share a couple of them. How much time do we have? As a matter of fact, Ankit, I think I'd like to take a moment and look at this in the context of where a practice is in their journey. Right? Because, the way we look at the business of private practice optometry is, it's one practice. Sure, it's going to evolve through these different phases of life cycle, but at the end of the day, it is still one practice providing the same general scope of services and retailing products. It's all following the same financial benchmarks, exposed to the same competition across the marketplace. So again, if we're looking at these one things that make it happen with a practice, I'd like us to take a moment and look at this as far as stage of the practice. So if we'll start with the emerging practice owners, I think the first one I want to give a shout out on is a practice that we had the opportunity to cold start with a number of years ago. As a matter of fact, this is a really cool practice. One of our very first cold starts that we did, that is Ciotti Eye Care down in Tampa, Florida. As a matter of fact, I recently had the opportunity to go visit Dr. Rianne and Dr. Nick Ciotti at their office. And it was amazing to reflect on the last 3 years and what this journey has been for them. So if you were to say, what was the one thing for them that really was the shift? Commitment to building the team, right? Because this husband-wife optometry duo amazing doctors, and they had this amazing vision for the practice. But as we have discussed so many times before, Ankit, there's a lot that goes from having this vision, this idea of what we want to do, to then making it happen. And particularly in private practice, it's imperative that the practice build the team of professional support around them. So if we're looking from a cold start standpoint, I would say building that team of advisors and professionals to see you through has got to be one of the most critical steps of that process. Similarly, if we look across the aisle of our emerging practice owners, we have doctors that are cold starting. We also have doctors that are acquiring practices. And we had an opportunity to work with an amazing practice up in the Northeast, Eyes on Litchfield. Dr. Tabitha Plunsky acquiring a practice from Dr. Thomasina Sideris, and an amazing journey we got to be a part of. And I would say, the big key piece for them was taking this boutique independent practice and allowing the new practice owner to put their spin on it in a sustainable manner. So, the key piece here for doctors that are acquiring practices that want to go in and make their change is you have absolutely got to construct the plan. And perhaps we'll unpack more of that in this conversation, because there are a few really key points that I think it's important our viewers are aware of here, because when we look at all of these practices that are for sale, and let's face it, Ankit, there are a lot of practices on the market. In just about any market you go to, there are doctors that are looking to retire, that are looking for that next generation to acquire their practice. Well, in so doing, what's going to happen is that these doctors buying these practices don't want to keep these things operating the way they were from back in the 90s or early 2000s. Many of these emerging practice owners want to implement newer, modern ways of practicing optometry, modern workflows, maybe make some changes in the optical. So I would say a key to success for doctors that are buying the fixer-upper practice and gonna really relaunch it under their own, it's absolutely imperative that you construct the plan, and it's done in a financially feasible manner as well. So those are a couple examples of some keys to success for the emerging practice owners. Again, those looking to cold start or acquire the practice, build your team, and be sure you're constructing a solid, sound plan around which we're going to go and execute and make it happen.
And let's build on that a little bit. Let's talk about some different stages that you might be hitting into. So you talked a little bit about the startup and the versus acquisition stages. I can also see, let's just call it expand to beyond hiring your first doctor stage. And then if you want to go multi-location, you want multiple locations. So can you kind of talk about those 3 stages, starting off either acquiring or buy or cold start, expanding internally with just more doctors, and the third stage might be expanding to multiple locations.
Yeah.
What do you see are things that are common pitfalls that people run into that they may not expect? And you can take that question however you want. That's a big question to chew on.
Yeah. And in Keith, we can unpack that in a few different ways. I think first and foremost is as a doctor, know what you want to do. Like technology and social media has done a lot of amazing things to connect people, but it's also done a lot of not amazing things in confusing people, because there's so much just noise and information being tossed out there that it's really difficult to gauge what to believe. But moreover than that, it's difficult to understand what's truly best for your unique situation. I know you guys are up in Metro Atlanta. I'm down here in Metro New Orleans. 2 amazing cities, pretty strong football rivalries, but we'll leave that alone. But 2 amazing cities down here in the Southeast, and yet 2 radically different worlds. And actually, I can say that with a whole lot of emphasis because we've actually done cold starts and have been working with growth practices in both of these markets. So we see firsthand the differences in the geospatial and competitive market dynamics, that marketplace. Who is that community surrounding the practice? What type of care are they in need of, and what type of optical goods may they be looking for? So I would say, some of these common pitfalls sometimes we find doctors running into is where they're almost kind of maybe adopting someone else's narrative for their own, right? Go into the online community, asking a generic question. When you think of any one of these generic questions, and maybe I'll toss this back to you, Ankit. I mean, look, I know you guys have now, y'all have a 2-location practice, right? Up there in Atlanta.
Correct. Yeah.
But consider when you got into a community, consider a piece of advice you would have seen in a community that had you applied it in your practice, it would have been an absolute disaster.
Yeah, we actually did that almost a couple of times. And it was interesting because it wasn't just from the community, it was also from other groups of optometrists and other people who have had success because their markets supported a certain way of practicing. And so understanding the difference of knowing what applies to me versus doesn't. So one example was we had brought in a consultant and she said, you know what, you need to be more of a volume shop. You got to lower your prices. This is what you got to do. I was like, that's not our model. We're more high-end boutique. And I think that's what we're going to stay at. And so if we had taken her advice, we would have shifted our entire business model. It would have probably taken us a while to pivot to that model and would have really hurt. And, this business, we bought an existing practice. This is our second location, and it was around for 20, 30 years prior to that and using the same model. So I was like, it's a significant thing to retrain our entire patient base on, hey, this is what we are now. So that was one thing that came up. Or asking the community, hey, do you want, and I don't think people understand the value of an exam, right? I think we asked them one time, hey, would you want a warranty would you want a subscription for your glasses or not? And those don't really work, right? And so that was kind of interesting. But we've also asked community questions like, hey, what do you want from your eye doctor? What do you want it to feel like? Well, I just wanted to come in and get my prescription and get out and make it as smooth as possible. It's like, okay, I understand that, but you're not our right patient.
Yeah.
Our patient values the experience. It values the health aspect. They value all that for us. Now, if we were a Medicaid office or more high volume where we couldn't do that because of financials, then we'd have a different model. But for us, that's what we found is understanding the people who we do work with versus people who we don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And then and that's just one example of how many countless, I mean, dare I say, perhaps even thousands of these examples per week going on across groups, across communities, within alliance buy groups, whatever the case may be, wherever there comes to be kind of this gathering of all the folks, they're like, oh, we're both optometrists. And if it's working for you, then it must mean it's going to work for me. That can't be further from the truth. It's kind of like raising kids. And I know you're a parent. I'm a parent, right? I mean, you got to really adapt your parenting to the child. There's the same vision of what you want to do as a parent to raise them, but you realize the strategy that you're going to use with each, how you're going to implement these parental approaches with each is going to be different. So again, time back to this question of what have I observed are some of the biggest pitfalls that folks run into? And it's simply not taking the time to devote to the process to really doing it for themselves. And that's where, we get into, obviously Akrinos has our way of doing it. Everybody's got different ways of doing it, but the most important thing is that you tie it back to you and your purpose and then creating the plan around that. So a really good example here, and I'll share with you actually a success story around that. We got a practice, Dr. Tyson Allard out in Oklahoma, True Vision Optometric out in Oklahoma. I've known Dr. Allard for a number of years. Amazing doctor, amazing people. We actually have done some things with his team as well. But in the context of this, what Dr. Allard wanted to do, it's actually quite brilliant if you ask me. And we're coming to work with a number of doctors in the Midwest that are doing this. So, Ankit, we're coming to discover now in rural markets, there are coming to be these, some folks will call them optometry deserts or eye care deserts, where you will have one provider serving a very large rural population where maybe years back, you may have had, just more of these providers more dispersed in these rural markets. So as you're seeing doctors that are retiring and they're struggling to find some kid to move from the big city out there to take over the practice, that's where I see opportunity for these entrepreneurial rural docs. You want to take it to the next level? What's going on one or two towns over? And what is that doctor's exit plan? So fast forward in the case of Dr. Allard, and we're looking at this in the context of an opportunity to acquire a practice. And in so doing, creating if you ask me, a beautiful exit for the retiring doctor that we've acquired the second location from, and then creating this amazing opportunity to recruit a young doctor who may have an interest in ownership, who we're really wanting to pull in and create something amazing out of. So where this ties back to this question of, the pitfalls and such, is that it wasn't until we had the opportunity to really dig into this data and assess the practice as is, assess the practice in the context of the vision that Dr. Allard had for it and the direction of it going, but then also all of the other analytics that are vital elements to making a profitable practice. And we may unpack some of those later in this conversation as well. But particularly when you start to look below the surface and you marry the purpose and vision for the practice with the appropriate analytics to put together an appropriate associate doctor program to bring to this doctor in a way that they're going to be handsomely compensated for what they are doing, but also given this opportunity to now be a part of a private practice in a way that I think we're now seeing more and more doctors are looking for these opportunities in private practice. And it may not always be this big fat salary and paying off student loans, but I tell you, and I think you know as well as I do, Ankit, when they're flashing the big fat salary and they're going to pay off your student loans, don't think you're not going to be working harder than you've ever worked for the next 10 years to do that. And we wonder how and why we're seeing so many doctors burn out, right? That's another kettle of fish into itself. That really applies to why we do what we do in Akrinos. So as it were, getting back to this whole pitfalls that doctors at times run into and how to navigate around those, you hit pause, you take a step back, you focus on your business. Focusing on your business with the right analytics and the right team, you will absolutely be able to put together a win-win plan.
So what I want to do is I want to make sure folks listening say like, hey, I want to build my empire. What are some questions that they can ask that might tune them into the right areas to focus in their practice? They're thinking, hey, I want to grow, but I'm not sure where to start. Based off of your perspective, what are some things that they could ask themselves? Okay, that might point them in the right direction.
Yeah. So it ties back to analytics. There's two realms of analytics. There's the hard analytics and the soft analytics. The hard analytics are easy.
That's easy. Funny. I just reflect a second. That's hilarious. So it's an oxymoron. The hard is easy. I like it.
The hard is easy. The hard analytics are easy, at least if you ask me. Because why? Well, we do business consulting. So we are living in the hard analytics all day, every day, which is what? Finances, QuickBooks, looking at these P&Ls, look at the cash flow actually going through the business. It's operations, production, performance, what's actually going on with the conversion, with the patient flow, with conversions across the practice, and any number of hard analytics. And keep hard analytics here is defined as what? Something we can like quantify. But there's this whole world of soft analytics that at times seems to be overlooked. And if you ask me, it's the soft analytics that actually really matter.
Yeah. So say more. What is an example of a soft analytic?
A soft analytic is something you've observed about a patient experience in your practice, the likes of which may not be totally a downward spiral, but nonetheless, something that you observed that you're like, I don't want this going on in my business. That is not an accurate representation of how I operate my practice. Now, mind you, Akrinos, we're looking at the hard data. So we can see the money going in and out. We can see the patient count, how many converted in the optical, how many bought contacts, how many did the dry eye. We can see all that hard stuff. But what you can't see was what I just mentioned. The fact that you're observing these other things going on in your business that we can't quantify in the hard, but nonetheless, it's your business. So we refer to those as soft analytics. So these are anything that ties back to representation of the business and purpose and vision of the business. So as it pertains to how to tackle, hey, I want to grow. Where do I start? Well, if you're starting at hard analytics, that's going to shine a light at a number of different things. We can look at it through the standpoint of financial benchmarking, which we do monthly with all of our clients. So, our practices who work with Akrinos, they know exactly where they are in their numbers every month. Oftentimes, we're more tuned into their financials than their CPA is, which is appropriate, right? Because CPAs are about tax and tax strategy. CPAs are not about day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month cash flow. That's more in ops, financial type role. So in the context of that, where do I start? We look at hard analytics. The numbers are what they are. We've got some amazing tools we have built to drill and identify exactly where those pain points are. But then there's this whole area of soft analytics. And it's really fascinating, Keith, because in our experience in Akrinos, as we're recording this, we're going to be celebrating our 5-year anniversary in a few months. In so doing, we work with hundreds of optometrists across North America. So we have now a lot of data, a lot of practices in our sample size. And I got to say, it's probably about a 50-50 split between doctors who are, it's clear that we look at hard analytics and we can identify all the things wrong, about 50%. But then we have another 50% that it's these soft things that are the pain points. It's the soft things that are keeping them up at night.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually heard, so I used to be a hard metric guy only until I heard something. Amazon does this actually. And I think you're kind of saying the same thing. Amazon, Jeff Bezos, and Andy, Andy Jassy, I think is a new CEO. But anyways, what they said was, look, when anecdotes differ from data, believe the anecdotes. So, I know this happens a lot, at least it did with us. Like, oh, look, but our numbers are fine. We're in range. But I'm like, yeah, but this one patient experience is off. But yeah, but this thing shouldn't be on this board this long. There's something wrong there. Those always point to something bigger, right? It's like, well, yeah, it seems like it's fine, but the patient said this one thing that I can read between the lines. Is that kind of what you're saying with the soft?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, and that's actually like one example of it, but that's a really, really good example because that's the stuff that for a chunk of practices out there, those are the things that has a doctor reaching out to Akrinos. Again, it maybe they're buying a new car every 5 years. They're going on nice trips. They're paying themselves a nice salary. They got the vacation home. What's wrong? It's the soft analytics. Sure, the money's coming through, but this isn't what I want in my business. Dare I say, it kind of ties back to what we were mentioning earlier about younger optometrists being attracted to big dollars. Okay. A hard analytic is what? You're going to get a big salary and you might even get your student loans paid off depending on who you're going to go and work for. But what's the soft? The quality of life is not what you're going to want. And I believe it's also being reflected in the data. There's a lot of really great studies out there around doctor burnout. And I'm not talking about studies here that are just confined to optometry or even eye care as a whole, Ankit, but I'm speaking here of the latest stats across all of healthcare. So these are studies coming out of the University of Chicago, UC Berkeley, Stanford, these healthcare think tanks. These are economists that have committed their entire career to studying healthcare. And what they are now showing is this massive fallout that we have experienced in our healthcare system here in the US as a result of this corporatization, consolidation of healthcare. And what they find here is that doctors, we know that physician burnout is high and continues to climb. We know the cost of care continues to climb. We know that the overall quality of care in the US is kind of going down the drain. But when we look in private practice, our doctors experience less burnout. The cost of care to patients in the system is lower, and the quality of care and patient experience is radically higher. So when we look at this stuff, that's where you come to see the soft analytics and the hard analytics really like blowing each other up. Because what are we seeing? You had a bunch of doctors that, look, we're not going to be able to see we're not going to be able to monitor doctor burnout and some sort of analytic you're running or analytic Akrinos is running. No, doctor burnout analytics are going to come from the economists that are doing these massive surveys of doctors. And again, I'm not talking just about optometry. This is so much bigger than just optometry, right?
Yeah.
So through that lens, we see again where the soft and the hard, it's vitally important that we have those in balance, because the hard may be there. Oh, I'm making a great, oh my gosh, this salary is unheard of. But the soft analytic is what? I'm miserable. I'm on the verge of burnout. I barely see my family, all of the things. And in private practice, and I'm not saying there aren't hard days in private practice. I know you could probably give me some lessons, right, of what you guys experience. Not that there aren't ups and peaks and valleys in private practice, but at the end of the day, that rate of doctor burnout is radically lower, as is the rate of patient churn, and a lot of other things that, well, have us realize that we're doing great things helping doctors in Akrinos.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to pivot just a little bit.
Sure.
What are you most excited about in the industry coming up, right? Like there's a lot on the horizon. You have a unique perspective. What are you excited about?
Yeah. I'll tell you what I am most excited about in the industry from a provider side is what this up and coming generation of doctors are up to, how they think, and the impacts they're going to have on society. Ankit, one of these really cool things I've gotten the opportunity to do here over my career is I work very closely with the American Optometric Association, the AOA, and specifically with the Center for Independent Practice and now the new Independent Practice Institute. And through working with the AOA and these organizations within the AOA, I get the opportunity to go into optometry schools and teach third and fourth years about business. And while oftentimes these workshops are general business, because not everybody wants to go into private practice, I get it. And I'll say this also, not everybody's necessarily cut out for private practice. But with the right team, anybody can succeed. I will say that. And I know that's something you and I have talked about, right? Because with the right tools, technology, I know what you guys are doing with my business care team, et cetera, et cetera. But what I'm most excited about from a provider side is the vision that these young and up and coming doctors have on how they're going to impact healthcare, because they have seen all of these ills, all the pain, administrative burden, managed care, people in HR, finance, career goals, all of these things. So when I go into the schools and I do these workshops with the students, I'm thrilled to share with you that there's this new interest in a renewed interest in private practice that for a few years was maybe waning a little bit. See, I think what happened is that private equity came into healthcare. Again, y'all, I'm not talking just optometry here. I'm talking all of healthcare. And we really need to start looking at optometry as being part of a broader healthcare ecosystem. But in the context of this, private equity came into healthcare in like 2013. It didn't come into eye care until more like 2015. I was in industry at the time working with a global leader in vision and eye care. So I was boots on the ground going in and out of offices. So I saw firsthand, I witnessed when private equity comes in and the impact it has on things. So if we go back in time, everybody's interested in private equity. Why? Well, retiring doctors were interested in private equity because they can make a lot of money selling their business. And then younger doctors were kind of excited about private equity because now they were going to start making a salary bigger than the private optometrists would have paid them prior. But now we're seeing the backlash. We're seeing the fallout, as I shared with those studies about burnout, cost of care, quality of care.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm really excited about this next generation of doctors is that they too are seeing it. They are realizing that when they're showing the big dollars, and even the big dollars with will pay off your tuition, more and more folks are realizing, okay, yeah, that's a lot of money, but that's not what I signed up for. That's not why I went to optometry school. It's not the scope of care that I'm looking to provide my patients. It's not how I want to serve my community, all of the things. So that's what I'm most excited about from a provider side, is this renewed interest in private practice. And whether that's with the emerging practice owner, like some of those that I share with you, Drs. Rianne and Nick Ciotti down in Tampa, or any number. I mean, so many practices we've called started. Or even fast forward and just think of more the enterprising practice owner who still has a long runway ahead of them, like Dr. Tyson Allard, who said, you know what, I've got one thriving practice. I understand this doctor 2 towns over is ready to retire. Let me see if I can now have 2 thriving practices. So from a provider side, it's very exciting to see this renewed interest in practice ownership.
Yeah. I like
From a technology side, I believe now we are in the golden age of utilizing technology to delight our patients, to serve our team in workflows, and to grow profitability, but only if we do it the right way. Because I do believe right now, unfortunately, a lot of practices perhaps are finding themselves being a bit practice poor, I call it. It's like being house poor. You familiar with the term house poor, Ankit?
Yeah, I have. It's like cash poor, house rich, or vice versa, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly. Yeah, like you have this insane house, but you barely have anything in it because all your money's going to covering the mortgage.
Oh, yeah, it's all tied in the capital. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we look at a practice and we consider practice poor. To our listeners out there, how many of you have a piece of equipment that isn't paying for itself? How many of you have more than one piece of equipment that's not paying for itself? And Keith, it is not uncommon for a practice to be paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month of equipment for leases, for equipment payments, when meanwhile that equipment is like not even covering the note on the equipment. Yeah. Another example, and I know this is something you and I have had a lot of conversations about. This is something I think is really impressive of what you guys have done in my B Care is subscriptions. We're so quick to find a fix that we'll go sign on because an influencer said sign on. And then before we know, we go down this list and then we look up and we have all of these subscriptions that are just not being utilized. So what I'm most excited about on the horizon is the fact that we're living in this golden age of technology and that there's so many amazing things this technology can do to further enhance the patient experience and delivery of care, to further streamline and optimize our workflows, and to further bolster the profitability of the practice. But the watch out here is that it's got to be done in the right way. And that's where you can see some of these themes of this conversation start to weave together. Because if a doctor went to the big trade show with a strategic plan to make an investment in a piece of equipment that they had already previously determined they're wanting to incorporate in, and they've already created all of the flows, processes, strategy, pricing, everything, then you invest in the equipment. Let's get this thing cash flow. But what happens all too often is it's the opposite of that. It's marketed everywhere because we know these companies have big pockets and they have a lot of money they can spend on marketing. It's being marketed everywhere. Doctors are making these purchases, And then if we make the purchase, then we're going to try to make the plan and create the pricing and train our team.
The field of dreams method, right? Build it and they will come.
That's
That's
just
the
time going by. Hell, 6 months goes by before you can even pitch it to a patient. So now you're 6 months into paying the note, and now you're deeper in the hole, which makes your break even that much further.
Yeah, and even like what I see a lot of pattern is like there's a bump at the first, and then you sort of forget about it because life happens, all these other things happen. So not being focused strategically on that. We actually had the same problem with IPLs when we first started, even though we were
Sure.
well aware of it. We started off by doing half an IPL a week, and now we have 4. Or more. But the reason why was because we just didn't focus on it. And then finally, I told the interesting thing is that part of the soft skills. My wife was the doctor, right? And so we had another doctor and said, okay, look, if you want all these nice things, this is what we kind of have to have financially to make it work. If you can do this, then sure, we can do it. And so that's exactly what she did. She took that on, took it as a challenge and said, okay, let's figure out how to bring the value to the patient, how to bring awareness. How do we present this better? How do we make sure that the patients are getting a lot from it? And now we have to do it pretty regularly. So you're right. The plan and implementation has to be there for you capital purchase. So curious, Erich, you're a really cool entrepreneur, interesting story. Can you share with us a story that made you who you are today?
Yeah. Wow. A lot of things come to mind from different phases of my life, right? Whether it's as a child or my teenage years, or my cycling career. I was a very competitive cyclist in my late teens and early 20s. But I think it's most appropriate to bring it into kind of a more modern time, and something that really impacted me on this journey of developing and launching Akrinos. And in key, it was simply the fact that others saw it in me. Others saw it in me. Saw what? Saw the passion, saw the insight, saw the impact, saw the loyalty, saw the commitment, all of those things. And to put it in context for you, by the way, what was it? It was, I've been around the industry for a number of years, and I had some doctors that I'd become really great friends with, and we were doing something after hours, having some after hours social time. They simply shared with me, hey, Erich, dude, if you could bring the insight and impacts across the whole scope of a practice the way you do in a few of these niched areas, you should really consider business consulting. Or have you ever considered business consulting? And it's crazy to think, Ankit, because at the time, it was just a statement. Those that have come to know me know that if something doesn't resonate with me, it's fine. You may not ever convince me. But if it hits me even just a little bit, look out, because I'm willing to cook something up out of it, make something pretty amazing. And that's what this Akrinos journey has been. And that's where, the gratitude to those doctors who they themselves just perhaps even said it casually. It came from somewhere, And I think here, the message to our listeners out there being to consider across your career when folks have said something, maybe paid a nice compliment, maybe taking that compliment though, and even challenged you out of that compliment. If they're challenged you off of that compliment, you got the goods. So no matter where you are, emerging practice owner looking to cold start or purchase a practice, the doctor in a growing phase looking to really maximize that growth potential, or a doctor looking to transition, exit the business. Consider where others have paid you a compliment and challenged you, and consider that that's perhaps where some of these hard analytics and soft analytics are really coming together in you, the person and the entrepreneur.
I like that. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's an awesome story. If people want to reach out to you, where can they find you and connect with you?
Yeah. So, look, find me on LinkedIn. Please do go ahead and shoot me a little connection on LinkedIn. Erich Mattei, ERICH You're also welcome to head on over to Akrinos.com. You can connect with me through that, or you can also just shoot me an email directly, Erich@Akrinos.com. And reach out, and would love to hear from you.
Awesome. And we'll put those all in the show notes for people too, so they don't have to write it down frantically if they're driving. Well, Erich, thank you again for being a guest on the show.
Well, Ankit, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and I really love some of the lessons you shared, specifically about, hey, make sure the hard metrics are easy, the soft metrics are hard. And that was such a cool insight. Like, you know what? You got to pay more attention to those sometimes. I'm going to take that to heart for sure and implement that myself. And, and thank you, audience. And if you learned something or laughed, or please share the podcast with a friend and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you use the link in the show notes of book a meeting, I'll send you a free copy of my book, Optometry Redefined. Thank you again, Erich, for being a guest on the show. This has been another exciting episode of Optometrists Building Empires. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Optometrists Building Empires. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, visit buildingempires.live. This show is proudly sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team was born out of staffing challenges my wife and I faced together, managing multiple optometry locations. We refined our approach at Classic Vision Care and now offer our expertise to others. If you're experiencing challenges with staffing and you'd like to set up a discovery call, we'd be happy to help you and connect you with the right resources. We'll see you next time.